You know the name, you know the polka dots, you know Crazy Train, and the riff every guitar shop kid in the world has tried to play. But you don't know this. He was 5'5". He didn't drink, he didn't do drugs. He spent the biggest tour of his life sneaking off after soundcheck to find classical guitar tutors at local universities. He had already decided to quit rock and roll and become a music professor. He told Ozzy, he told the band, he told his mother. Then a tour bus driver, with cocaine in his system and an expired medical certificate, took him up in a stolen plane and tried to buzz the bus where his bandmates were sleeping. 3 passes. The third one clipped the bus. He was 25 years old. He had recorded 2 studio albums. The world had known his name for less than 30 months. And by the time the fire stopped burning that morning in Florida, he had already changed what a guitar was supposed to do. Forever. Every date is documented. Every detail in the official report. What people still argue about is what he saw in the cockpit, who put him on that plane, and why the smallest guy in the room walked away from rock and roll the same week it killed him. 10 moments, all real. This is Randy Rhoads' story. Number 10. The Boy from Musonia. Randall William Rhoads was born December 6, 1956 at St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, California. His father, Bill, was a public school music teacher. His mother, Dolores, had a degree in music from UCLA, taught classical piano and trumpet, and ran a school called Musonia in North Hollywood that she had opened around 1948. When Randy was 17 months old, his father packed up and left. Dolores raised 3 kids alone in a building full of pianos. He was the smallest kid on every block he ever lived on. Quiet, polite, religious. The family was devout Lutheran. His older brother, Kella, later said Randy was probably the kindest human being he ever met. And he was a prodigy. At 6½, he picked up his grandfather's old Gibson Army Navy classical acoustic and never put it down. Dolores gave him to a Musonia rock instructor named Scott Shelley. Within a year, Shelley handed him back. He told Dolores there was nothing left for him to teach the boy. Randy was already past him. So Dolores enrolled him in everything else the school offered. Folk guitar, classical theory, piano. He absorbed all of it. He graduated Burbank High School early, at 16 through a condensed program, so he could teach guitar at his mother's school during the day and play in dive bars at night. By his late teens, he was teaching students twice his age. Years later, his mother said it the simplest way. In all the years she'd been teaching, she had never seen a student who just loved it that much. That love was about to take him somewhere nobody at Musonia could prepare him for. Number 9. The band that couldn't get a record deal in America. In May 1975, 4 kids in Burbank called themselves Quiet Riot. The name came from a misheard comment by Status Quo's guitarist. The lineup was Randy on guitar, his best friend Kelly Garney on bass. Randy had personally taught Garney to play. Kevin Dubrow singing, and Drew Forsyth on drums. They became the loudest band on the Sunset Strip. They got signed to Sony in Japan. They put out 2 albums there in 1977 and 1978 that they couldn't release in their own country. Every American label that came to see them passed. Garney got fired after a drunken incident in which he discharged a handgun through the ceiling, threatened Dubrow's life, and ended up in a fistfight with Randy. The replacement bassist was an old friend named Rudy Sarzo. The polka dot shirts and bow ties became Quiet Riot's visual signature, mostly because Randy liked the way they looked under the strip lights. On July 3rd, 1979, Randy walked into a small custom shop and asked a luthier named Carl Sandoval to build him a flying V with white polka dots and a custom arrowhead headstock. Total cost, $738. He picked it up on September 22nd. 3 weeks later, the strap slipped, the headstock snapped on stage, and Sandoval had to fix it. The guitar would still end up on the cover of magazines after Randy was dead. Quiet Riot were going nowhere. Frustrated, exhausted, broke. Dubrow later said that what happened next didn't derail the band. It ended it. Because that same September, Randy got a phone call from a guy he'd never met. about an audition for a singer he'd never heard of. Number 8. The Audition. Ozzy doesn't remember. Ozzy Osbourne had just been fired from Black Sabbath. He was hiding in a Los Angeles hotel, drowning. A bassist named Dana Strum had been hired to find him a guitar player and was making cold calls all over the city. Strum kept calling Quiet Riot's number. Randy kept hanging up. He had no idea who Ozzy Osbourne was. His mother finally told him to take the meeting, just to make industry contacts. He went in September of 1979 to a rehearsal studio in LA with his white Les Paul and a small practice amp. What happened next, Randy and Ozzy described differently for the rest of their lives. Randy's version, he tuned up, played a few warm-up runs and harmonics, and Ozzy said, "You've got the gig." Randy said it gave him the weirdest feeling because he was sure Ozzy hadn't actually heard him play yet. Ozzy's version told in interviews for decades. He was so out of his mind that night, he never left the control room. He just heard a sound through the door, what he later called the most insane solo he'd ever heard, and asked if anyone was hallucinating. Then he hired the kid. Randy didn't even meet Ozzy in person until the next day at the hotel. He was 22. He was about to fly to England, walk into Ridge Farm Studios in Surrey, and record an album that would resurrect the most famous singer in heavy metal from the dead. But the audition story everybody knows, the one where Ozzy was conscious for it, even Ozzy admitted on the record that part wasn't true. Number 7. 2 albums that rewrote the instrument. Blizzard of Ozz was released in the UK on September 12, 1980. Diary of a Madman followed on November 7, 1981. 14 months, 2 records. That is the entire studio output of Randy Rhoads. On those 2 albums, he co-wrote Crazy Train, Mr Crowley, Suicide Solution, Goodbye to Romance, Revelation, Over the Mountain, Flying High Again, Believer, and the title track, Diary of a Madman. He played a classical acoustic instrumental named D for his mother, Dolores. He stacked harmonies the way a classical composer would stack a fugue. He took ideas straight out of Bach and Pachelbel and shoved them into a heavy metal song, without anyone in the room noticing he was doing it. Rolling Stone later ranked Blizzard of Ozz among the top 10 greatest metal albums of all time. Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley have spent 4 decades on lists of the greatest guitar solos ever recorded. And here's the part most people miss. Rudy Sarzo has confirmed it more than once. Some of those riffs weren't new. The main hook of Suicide Solution came from a discarded Quiet Riot demo. The seeds of half of Blizzard had been sitting on cassette tapes in Burbank for years, while every American label in the country told them they weren't good enough. Bob Daisley played bass on those records. Lee Kerslake played drums. Both were fired by Sharon Arden, Ozzy's manager and future wife, between recording and the US tour, replaced by Sarzo and Tommy Aldridge for the road. Sarzo and Aldridge appeared on the cover of Diary of a Madman without playing a single note on it. Then, in 2002, 20 years after Randy was dead, Sharon ordered the Daisley and Kerslake performances stripped from both albums and re-recorded by new players. Fans called it retaliation for a royalty lawsuit. The original tapes were quietly restored on the 30th anniversary editions in 2011. Randy never lived to see any of it. Number 6. The Punch in the Hotel. On the road, Randy didn't behave like anybody else in that band. He didn't drink, at most a small glass of anisette. He didn't touch hard drugs, he chain smoked, he carried classical sheet music in his suitcase. In every city, he found a local university music teacher and booked a private lesson while the rest of the band slept off the night before. He had decided quietly that his future wasn't this band. He told Tommy Aldridge, he told Rudy Sarzo, he told Kelly Garney, he told his mother. He had picked the school, UCLA, and the degree, classical guitar. Ozzy admitted later in the documentary Don't Blame Me that he didn't think Randy would have stayed in his band if he'd lived. And then, in early 1982, the situation cracked. According to bassist Bob Daisley, citing drummer Tommy Aldridge, Sharon and Ozzy proposed cutting a live album of Black Sabbath covers at Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. Randy refused. He didn't want to be part of a Sabbath nostalgia record. He had his own thing. The argument moved from a meeting room to a hotel room, and Ozzy threw a punch. He hit Randy in the face. This account comes from Daisley and Aldridge. Ozzy himself has never publicly confirmed it. Kelly Garney has spoken about it indirectly. Whether it was one moment or a series of moments, by the spring of 1982, the band that had remade Ozzy's career was held together by tour dates and contracts. Then, the third person in this story stepped on board the bus. Number 5. The driver who flew planes. The bus driver's name was Andrew Aycock. He was 36. The Osbourne tour had hired him to drive between cities at night. Aycock also had a private pilot's license. According to the official report from the National Transportation Safety Board, his last medical certificate, the document a private pilot legally needs to fly, was dated November 16, 1979. By March 1982, it had been expired for over 2 years. His biennial flight review was overdue. His urine, after the crash, contained traces of cocaine. According to Stephen Rosen's 2012 biography of Randy, Aycock had also been involved in a previous fatal aviation incident, a helicopter accident reportedly years earlier, in which someone had died. Whether anyone in management knew about that history before they hired him is one of the questions that has never been fully answered. This was the man behind the wheel of the bus on the night of March 18, 1982, driving the band south after their final concert in Knoxville, Tennessee. 6,000 fans, 16 songs. Randy was reportedly in unusually good spirits that night. The bus was supposed to drive straight to Orlando for a festival the next day. But around dawn, the air conditioning unit on the bus broke down. Aycock pulled off Highway 27 and parked the bus next to a Georgian-style mansion on a private property in Leesburg, Florida, called Flying Baron Estates. There was a small grass airstrip on the property. There was also a hangar with a 1955 Beechcraft Bonanza F-35 inside it. The plane belonged to a man named Mike Parton and was kept there by the property owner, country promoter Jerry Calhoun. Aycock did not have permission to take that plane up. He took it anyway. Number 4. The third pass. The first flight that morning was a short one. Aycock took up keyboardist Don Airey and tour manager Jake Duncan. He buzzed the parked bus once, low, trying to wake up Tommy Aldridge as a joke. He landed safely. The second flight was different. He convinced Randy to come up. Randy was reportedly afraid of flying. The pitch was that the band's hairdresser and seamstress, Rachel Youngblood, a 58-year-old woman with a heart condition, wanted to take aerial photos. Aycock promised he wouldn't do anything risky. Randy brought a camera. Rudy Sarzo was invited too. Sarzo passed. He wanted to sleep. The plane took off around 9 in the morning. Inside the bus, Ozzy Osbourne and Sharon were still asleep. Don Airey had walked back out onto the field with a telephoto lens to photograph the second flight from the ground. Aycock buzzed the bus once, then again. On the third pass, the right wing, some accounts say the left, clipped the side of the bus. The wing tore off. The plane spun, sheared off the top of a pine tree, and slammed into the garage of Calhoun's mansion. 2 cars inside the garage were destroyed. The aircraft and the house caught fire. All 3 on the plane were killed instantly. Their bodies were burned beyond visual recognition. Randy was identified by the jewelry he was wearing, Aycock by his dental records. The official National Transportation Safety Board report number is MIA82, FA078. The conclusion is 1 paragraph. The pilot, who was a rock group's driver, took the aircraft from its hangar without permission to joyride members of the group. During the second flight, the wing struck the bus during one of several low passes. The aircraft then hit a tree and a residence. A post-crash fire occurred. Don Airey later said that on the third pass, looking up through the lens, he thought he saw something that looked like a struggle in the cockpit just before impact. Bob Daisley has since proposed an alternate theory, that Rachel Youngblood, sitting in the front, suffered a fatal heart attack and slumped onto the dual controls. None of that is in the official record. What is in the record is the cocaine and ACOG system, the expired certificate, the unauthorized aircraft, and the 3 low passes over a sleeping bus. Randy Rhoads was 25 years old. Number 3, the day Ozzy kept the tour going. Ozzy was woken up by what he later described in a sworn statement as a loud explosion. He thought the bus had hit a vehicle. He started screaming at Sharon to get off the bus. They climbed out into smoke and the smell of aviation fuel. Sharon, decades later, told a documentary crew that all they could see was fire. Tommy Aldridge said Sharon came unglued. She turned on the tour manager and screamed at him for letting that boy onto the plane. Randy's brother-in-law flew in from California to identify what was left of him. The band was held in Leesburg by Florida authorities for 2 days. Ozzy reportedly told Sharon that night that he didn't think he wanted to be a rock and roll musician anymore. According to his own memoir, he said it because if Randy hadn't been in his band, Randy wouldn't have been on that plane. Then, less than 2 weeks later, he went on The Late Show with David Letterman on his own decision and told the audience, "You can't kill rock and roll." The tour resumed. Bernie Torme from Gillan flew in to fill the dates. Brad Gillis from Night Ranger finished the run. By the end of 1982, a guitarist named Jake E. Lee had been hired full-time after a young player named George Lynch was hired and then fired in front of him with one sentence: "He's got it. You don't, you're fired." The band that Randy Rhoads had built kept moving. The funeral was held at First Lutheran Church in Burbank. 2 photos were placed on the coffin, a portrait of him and a shot of him on stage in San Francisco. The headstone at Mountain View Cemetery in San Bernardino reads, "An inspiration for all young people." Fans still leave flowers there on his birthday. They have done it every December 6th for over 40 years. Number 2. The band he left behind that went to number 1 without him. A year after Randy died, Quiet Riot, the band he had quit with a completely different lineup of Dubrow, Sarzo, Carlos Cavazo, and Frankie Banali, released an album called Metal Health. It came out March 11, 1983. On November 26, 1983, it knocked the Police's Synchronicity off the top of the Billboard 200. Metal Health became the first heavy metal album in history to reach number 1 in the United States. The closing track, written by Dubrow, was called Thunderbird. It is line for line a tribute to Randy Rhoads, the American success Quiet Riot could not get for 10 years, while Randy was alive, arrived inside 12 months of his death. Some of the songs were even older Randy-era arrangements. Dubrow openly said it would not have happened without him. 5 years later, in April 1987, Sharon and Ozzy released a live album recorded mostly in Cleveland in May 1981. They called it Tribute. It hit number 6 on the Billboard 200. By then, Jake E. Lee, the guitarist Sharon had hired to replace Randy, was on his way out of the band. Some music historians believe the success of Tribute, which made it impossible for any successor to compete with Randy's ghost, was part of the reason. Whether or not that's the full story, Lee was gone by 1987. Zakk Wylde came in next. The pattern was set. For the next 4 decades, every guitar player who walked into Ozzy's band would be measured by fans and by Ozzy himself against a kid from Burbank who had recorded with him for 14 months. None of them ever quite escaped the comparison. Number 1. The Boy Who Was Leaving. Randy Rhoads was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on October 30th, 2021, with the Musical Excellence Award. Tom Morello, who named his own son Roman Randall in part after Randy, gave the induction speech and called him a peerless talent. Kirk Hammett spoke. Zakk Wylde said Randy belonged at the round table of greatness, alongside Hendrix, Page, Beck, Clapton, and Van Halen. The exhibit displayed his white Jackson Concorde, a guitar he had personally helped design on a flight home in December 1980. A guitar that became the foundation Jackson Guitars built an entire company around after he was dead. Eddie Van Halen, in 1982, said publicly that everything Randy did, he had learned from Eddie. According to Kelly Garney, that was wishful thinking. The two of them met once at a record store in 1981. Eddie was buying Diary of a Madman. Randy was buying Fair Warning. There was no rivalry. There was a fascination. That was all. Dolores Rhoads outlived her son by 33 years. She kept teaching at Musonia until shortly before her death on November 11, 2015, at the age of 95. The school is still open. His brother Kelly runs it now. On the night of November 28, 2019, thieves broke into Musonia and stole some of Randy's personal items, including his very first electric guitar, a 1963 Harmony Rocket, and a prototype Marshall amp the company had built especially for him. Ozzy posted a $25,000 reward. The items were recovered from a dumpster within days. On July 22, 2025, Ozzy Osbourne died at 76. In one of the last interviews he gave on the subject, marking the 43rd anniversary of Randy's death months earlier, he wrote that Randy was quite possibly the best composer and musician he had ever met in his life. That Randy had come into his life like a bolt of lightning and been gone again the same way. That he considered himself one of the luckiest men alive to have known him. And in the spring of 2026, a petition started by a fan and musician named Bill Lo, with the support of Randy's sister Kathy, gathered thousands of signatures, asking the city of Burbank to commission a life-size bronze statue of Randy at Stop Canyon Park. The same park where, as a teenager, he and Kelly Garney used to sit on the grass, on weekends, and play their guitars for whoever walked by. Randy Rhoads was 5'5". He recorded 2 studio albums. He was on the cover of Guitar Player magazine before he turned 25. He didn't drink, didn't do drugs, taught Sunday school in his head every time he toured, called his mother before every show, and was the most polite man in the loudest room on earth. He had decided to leave rock and roll for a classroom. He told everyone. He had picked the university. He had set the date in his own head. The world was going to lose him to a music conservatory. Instead, the world lost him to a tour bus, an unauthorized plane, an off-duty driver with cocaine in his system, and a third low pass over the wrong piece of metal. Every legend in metal, Wylde, Hammett, Dimebag, Petrucci, Malmsteen, has stood on a stage and pointed back at the kid from Musonia. 44 years later, no one has caught him. The boy who was about to walk away became the one nobody could replace. Which detail hit hardest? The expired medical certificate? The classical degree he was about to enroll in? The third low pass? Drop a comment. And if you want more untold stories about the legends you thought you knew, hit subscribe. There's a lot more coming.